You're listening to Chef's Diary.
Powered by Riverside.
Right, welcome to Food Trivia. So I've got three questions for you. Number one, welcome to Flavortown is the catchphrase of which Food Network host? Number two, horseradish was the first commercially packaged and sold food condiment by what Pittsburgh-based company? And number three, according to the National Gardening Association, what is the most common food grown in home gardens? Also, a caprese salad ingredient. What do you think? All right, so let's get to the answers. So, for the first question, welcome to Flavortown is the catchphrase of which Food Network host? If you said Guy Fieri, you are correct. Give yourself a round of applause. All right, so for the second question, and that was horseradish was the first commercially packaged and sold food condiment by what Pittsburgh's based company? If you said Heinz, you are correct. All right, give yourself another round of applause. And finally, if you said tomatoes for this question, according to the National Gardening, Association, what is the most common food grown in home gardens? And it is also a caprese salad ingredient. Yes, that answer is tomatoes. Did you say that? If you did, give yourself another round of applause. All right, everybody, that was food trivia for today. Thanks for playing. Hey, everybody. I am back with a special guest. Her name is Sarah Metzger, and we are going to talk today about plant-based lifestyle, living, eating, vegan. Come on, we're going to talk about it today. She has an amazing story that she's going to share. I can't wait to find out maybe even some favorite foods that she's eating right now. We might be interested in as well. But before we get into all of that, I got to welcome you to the Chef's Podcast here. So, Chef's Diary. Thanks for being here. And I got to ask you first, Sarah, what is your favorite vegan dessert?
Oh, wow. That's hard to narrow that down for sure. I mean, I would say just based on what is part of my craft, I would gravitate towards cakes for sure.
Okay, my favorite.
Yes. Yes, yes. I'm certainly a cake over pie type of person.
Me too. Okay, so all right, one thing we have in common. I'm definitely cake. In fact, okay, so I'm gonna share this. I used to be a cake addict. It was bad, and it started really young for me. They have all these pictures of me when I was a toddler with cake all over my face for birthdays. And then it goes into holidays. And then at the end of the day, it was just like any day. I was at the bakery. I couldn't believe that I used to eat cake like that, but I'm under control now. But I still love a nice slice of cake. So as a chef, and I am not a vegan chef, I am looking forward to learning some things from you today. So when you mention cake, I've had vegan cake from different places. And just like any other bakery or place, some things are good, right? From some places and some things are not. So it's not necessarily because it's vegan. But tell me, what mistakes are people making when they are trying to bake with a vegan recipe, like what mistakes do you think? Because I think sometimes, I see things are dry or just not having a lot of flavor. What can people do to improve their baking?
I think you need to ask yourself, what is your why in terms of what you are trying to get out of your final cake and why? So, what a lot of people have a misconception about is that just because it's vegan means it's healthy, right? So,
Mhm.
people will try to healthify things like cakes and cookies. And sometimes you can do that with a lot of success and it's a delicious outcome. But most people, especially those that you want to either make believers of who are not plant based,
Mhm.
or you want to just give somebody a more, traditional cake experience, don't try to healthify something that's meant to be an indulgence, I guess.
Okay.
So that for me is number one. I am not trying to convince people that cake is a health food. So I will not do things like, um, try to be fat free or sugar free or things like that in my cakes. I just don't think that that is the goal. If I'm making somebody's birthday cake for them, that is a annual treat that they want to enjoy fully. Um,
Mhm.
on all levels, right? So I'm not trying to healthify anybody's birthday cake and take the fun out of that, so to speak. That's one of the
Right.
biggest mistakes I would say.
Okay, so you're not trying to make a kid's birthday or anybody's birthday cake a cauliflower broccoli cake.
No, so that and that's right there is what you said, chef, is a lot of the misconception. You are not trying to make, sugar turn into broccoli, right? I mean, if you're
Right.
trying to do that, then there's recipes that can accommodate that for sure, but don't expect it to then be like a traditional birthday cake that is nostalgic from your childhood or your pre-plant-based days. I think you'll be disappointed. So just allow those indulgences. Plant-based cakes are healthier just by default because you've removed animal products that contain things like cholesterol. So already it's better than the traditional baked goods from that standpoint. But I wouldn't go as far as to try to make it sugar free or replace the fats with some type of vegetable puree or something like that. It's just not what I think speaks to people.
Yeah, I like that. See, we're starting off on a good foot already because I do think that's one of the bigger mistakes that people make. And I also like the fact that you mentioned that sometimes people automatically assume the word vegan for healthy,
Right.
and that may not always be the case. But I do know that most people are looking towards being vegan, having a plant based lifestyle because they're trying to live more healthy.
Mhm.
And I think also the issue might be there's so many products and there's so much information out here that if they're new to it, you kind of don't know. It's like you're swimming in the ocean of all this stuff and you don't know where to start or what to
Mhm.
believe. So it seems to me like today you're going to help some people with getting some information because I think that's the bigger issue for a lot of people. It's just so much
Mhm.
information out here, and not everything is always correct. Not every recipe is going to reflect or take you back to what your grandmother or your mother made. And if you have those expectations, people, what she's saying is that you've got to remove those expectations. And I think also um, make a place and make a space rather for something new.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to taste exactly like something else. So here's my next question. When someone says they're interested in starting a plant-based lifestyle, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel excited for them because they are thinking beyond what has been standardized for them, what has been, presented to them as just the only way, right? Because I think a lot of us grew up very meat and potatoes type of people who are now transitioned to either fully plant based or a more plant forward state of thinking. And that is exciting to have people understanding that they can broaden their plate, so to speak, and really start to include things that they didn't even know were options before. So
Yeah.
that to me is really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. And I think it's exciting for people when you first start to, because it's like, it there are so many opportunities and there are so many amazing ingredients and products
Mm.
out there. And I mean, just starting natural. I'm not even talking about, I mean, what comes from the ground, what's growing from the ground. I think we've sometimes gotten away from that, thinking that everything, needs to already be processed or in the box
Right.
or in the can or in the freezer. And in some cases, I think because those things are already pre-made, and I'm not saying that you can't get anything pre-made, but I think the creativity kind of goes out the door sometimes, though. You don't have to be when it's already pre-made. And if that's what you're doing on a regular basis, basically probably from, convenience or for convenience. But when that happens, I don't think that people, they lose that creativity and think, oh, I can't cook. Yes, you can. You can do this. And it really starts with these natural ingredients, these natural foods that literally grow right out of the ground. A carrot can do more than what my grandmother did with carrots. Okay. You can do more. So I want, at some point you've decided, because you mentioned that most of us grew up meat and potatoes, kind of having a standard diet or a standard way of looking at it. But there was a change that happened with you. So what was that journey like? How did you get into this plant-based lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a great question. The best way I can describe that is becoming plant based or vegan, um, which I use those terms interchangeably. But it was just kind of my natural evolution. That's the best way I can describe it. I started to no longer want to eat red meats, and then it was pork, and then it was chicken. And then, by the time I realized what I was doing, removing just animal foods from my diet, I started just looking into what that actually meant. I didn't even know the term vegan when I started just randomly taking these types of foods off my plate. But as I continued down that path, it just felt more and more aligned with me to no longer eat animals. For me, it started as a health reason. I wasn't sick or anything in that regard, but I am an avid runner. I'm a long distance runner, and I've always cared deeply about how I fueled my body for just that performance and the recovery, and just leaned in more and more to what I was learning about why plant-based diets were best for fueling my body. From there, everything else became important in terms of, animal welfare and environmental concerns, and just the energy transfer and how food gets to our plate. But
Mhm.
for me, it was just how I evolved, and from there, I knew that I wasn't going to just compromise everything that I once loved in terms of eating just because I was choosing to take animals off my plate. So I absolutely spent time in my kitchen creating, developing, having my hands in my food, and just creating food that was deeply satisfying and nourishing without feeling like I was lacking anything. And I think that's one of the things that people have a misconception about. They feel as if they are going to have to sacrifice. They feel that they're going to miss the foods that they once loved if they choose to eat vegan foods. And that's just not true.
Okay, so what kinds of things or tips would you give someone who is feeling that way? So maybe, they loved meatloaf or, a good fried chicken or something of that nature. And they want to do something that they consider maybe more healthy for them, but they're not really sure how to fill in those blanks. Like, what do I do? Do I never have this taste again? What tips or advice would you give for someone who's contemplating this lifestyle, but is afraid? of giving up, something that they actually love to eat?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start off by saying that this is an amazing time to be exploring veganism because there are so many really amazing, what I'll call transitional types of foods that are available, like from grocery store shelves, that are very, very reminiscent, have often, fooled the skeptics in terms of like, is it meat? Is it not? Is it cheese? Is it not? There's a vast variety of those transitional foods. And I call them transitional foods because if you are really looking to make a change in terms of your health, you don't want to just only have processed store-bought foods, just like you wouldn't if they were animal-based. Plant-based or animal-based processed foods are those that you should have sparingly. But for somebody coming off of a animal-heavy plates to a plant-heavy plate, those are great options. Things like the Impossible Burgers and,
My daughter loves
Beyonds and
those.
things like that. I mean, those are great transitions, right? But
Hmm.
once you are kind of moving deeper onto the path, if you're willing to spend some time in your own kitchen crafting your own foods, you are going to just have a deeper appreciation for plants than anything you could buy processed off the shelf at a store.
Hmm.
That being said, another part of that conversation is something that you touched on a little earlier, in that just because something isn't exactly the same as you once remember it to be doesn't mean it isn't delicious in its own right. So, if you are expecting everything to be like grandma's meatloaf, if you are expecting everything to, be exactly as it once was in order for you to move towards a healthier way of eating, you may find yourself a little discouraged along the way
Yeah.
because you're doing this for the reason of removing animals and adding plants. So, it's like don't expect an apple to be an orange type of thing.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
also, that orange is really delicious.
Hmm.
So let's not discredit that.
Right. And I love that. Thanks for sharing that, because that is one nugget that I think people really need to hear, and I don't hear it as often as it should be said to folks, especially if you're starting. So, before we move on, you mentioned transitional foods. You talked about plant forward, plant based. We said vegan. These are all of these terms and these
Yeah.
words. So, is there a difference between being plant based, plant forward, and vegan?
So they have different definitions. A lot of times they are interchanged. So plant forward is more of the definition of somebody is very interested in eating more plants, including less animals in their lifestyles as well as on their plate, but maybe they aren't fully removed from that yet. Maybe, they still eat eggs, or maybe they still have some other type of animal products, and they are focused on plant heavy. So that's more plant forward type of living.
Okay.
A
Okay.
plant based lifestyle is that of which removes all animal products from somebody's plates, but perhaps they still have a leather purse, or perhaps they still go to places that use animals for entertainment, like zoos or things like that.
Mm,
So they're using
okay.
animals in other ways in life, just not eating them.
Okay.
Veganism is more of the strict end of things, in that you make decisions every day to remove animals, not just from your plates but from your lifestyle. So you
Okay.
wouldn't choose a leather couch, you wouldn't choose a fur coat, that type of thing. Anywhere
Okay.
animals are being exploited for entertainment purposes or even research purposes, that is not something a strict vegan would subscribe to.
Thank you. Okay, so now that makes a lot of sense. And what I'm hearing, because I want to make sure that everybody understands, is that veganism is not just about what you're putting on your plate, what you're putting in your body as far as food. It is a complete lifestyle and a mindset that really is saying, We're staying away from anything that would disrespect, harm, or use animals in a way that's not necessary, or that just isn't, I would say maybe not necessary, or just using animals for anything other than them just existing. Is that okay to say, Raquel?
Right, that's the gist of it for sure. The idea is to do as little harm as possible, or in the vegan culture, it's the word ahimsa is often applied to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to just do what you can when you know better, do better type of thinking. I for sure subscribe to that. But I also am of the belief that nobody is going to be perfect in that part of things. There are going to be times when just things are unavoidable, or maybe you're unaware. So just keeping that in mind too. I think a lot of people can get overwhelmed with feeling like it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And while you want to do what you can and know better, do better type of mindset, don't let any type of, you know, misstep or sidestep derail your whole intention.
And the other thing I think, and this is, I've heard this in conversation with people who, because it seems like sometimes when people say if they're vegan or vegetarian or pescatarian, there's always like this strong opposition. It's like there's this voice from the other side of the restaurant or the table. You're wrong. I've always just heard people, do that. So when it comes to veganism, I think sometimes too, people might assume that it's boring. And I don't think that it's boring. I think that again, you mentioned about, cooking and creating in your own kitchen. It's not boring. I think the fact that you can discover new things and new ways to use ingredients that maybe you haven't used before, or those same old ingredients, but just in a new way. And you did something, and I just want to talk about this a little bit. You opened a bakery, an eatery, and you were able to share your love of food, right? And you were able to share this plant-based food education in this space. um Tell me, take us there. What was it like having your own space where you were able to really live out and share with other people this lifestyle, and to show them that, hey, it's not boring?
Yeah, take you back to that. That was one of the best ways I have been of service in my professional life. And the absolute honor and privilege it is to be able to feed people um, is just truly, truly amazing. And that storefront, it was called Lee Lulo's, was a that was a amazing experience. I mean, I really can't say enough about it. I mean, that was an absolute way that I connected with people on a level that I didn't even know was possible. That
Hmm.
storefront was created out of my own want for something that didn't exist. It was the first all vegan eatery in Northwest Indiana that created both eats and treats as well as custom cakes, and gave hands on food education instruction for adults
Wow.
and children. It was an
Wow.
amazing experience, and things that have developed as a result of that experience have truly just changed changed my life for sure, and other people's as well.
I can't even imagine having a space like I've been wanting a space like that, a place like that around when we are driving around and traveling. And honestly, sometimes, just to be honest, it's like, okay, we're at this restaurant or we're at this fast food place, and you got to sift through the menu to figure out, okay, what can I have, right?
Mhm.
Or even sometimes going to some grocery stores, I always say, can we just have a place where I don't have to sift through to find something that's not gonna be harmful to me,
Mhm.
but I can choose, anything on the menu? That would be awesome. And to know that you had Lee, is it Lee Lulo's? Is that what it was?
Lingu
Okay.
loads, yes.
Yeah. That sounds. Was there a favorite um dish or a favorite menu item that people requested a lot that maybe you still make today?
I definitely make all of those items still today, even just in my own home. They were very much loved. We offered things that were more comfort level type of foods, things like
Mhm.
barbecue, things like mac and cheese, grilled mac and cheese
Okay.
sandwiches, French dip sandwiches, things that were very just
Yummy.
yeah, just really I mean, we had salads and, things like that as well, and soups and those things, but the things that people, like, kept coming back for were things like grilled mac and cheese sandwich, the barbecue plates, the French dip, the taco experience, the gyro, those things are, favorites for sure, and they're things that as a plant-based or vegan um person, you can't just like walk in anywhere and get that. If somebody does have an option at a different restaurant, it usually is just an Impossible Burger. It is,
Mhm.
just a salad. And I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't offer any of those types of pre-made foods in my eatery. Everything we made from scratch with our hands. And
Mhm.
that was one of the things that was most important to me when I decided I needed to make food to feed other people. Was it wasn't just going to be me making something that they could go to the grocery store and buy.
Yeah.
They needed to feel that love infused in their food from something I handcrafted for them.
I'm over here smiling. I'm
Mm.
smiling. That's the second thing we have in common, definitely, because cooking with love, um you can't just discredit that, and you can't take that for granted, because honestly, it does make a difference when you are literally trying to provide something to your customers that they're not going to just find anywhere, but that you're doing it from a sense of purpose and passion and love. You can taste that. So sometimes people go,
Yeah.
"What's in this?"
That's the
We're
secret
not being
ingredient.
Right. We're not being silly or just saying this. It really is the love. You can taste it. You can taste it in food when you have a chef that is cooking with that passion. And what's interesting is I was reading your bio, and also in our previous conversation, you're self-taught.
Yes.
You're self-taught. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. Now, how did that start? Because there's one thing to say, okay, this is a lifestyle that I want. This is how I want to eat. And then make that for yourself, for your family. How do you move from that to saying, I'm going to be self-taught and be a chef serving others? Because that's a job there.
Mm. Well, and let's touch on the term self-taught. I mean, yes, I am self-taught in that I did not go to a formal culinary school, but
Hmm.
also I have had influence my entire life in terms of
Hmm.
who has showed me what it means to create food. And that started with my grandmothers. There are my earliest memories of
Wow.
being in the kitchen with my grandmothers, and that love of food and feeding people just absolutely continued to follow me throughout my life. So, self-taught is for sure something that I guess officially would define what I've created for
Hmm.
myself. There have been some immersions and workshops and things that I've participated in, which have been valuable for sure. But really, just being in my kitchen, knowing that this is in my heart to
Hmm.
to do for people and to be of service with, that I feel like is some of the best experience and knowledge that you can pass on to those that enjoy what you're creating for them.
Awesome. Okay. So, I'm also saying that in your bio, it says that food remains my activism and is at the forefront of how I contribute to making the world a better, more compassionate place to be. I love that. So, tell me what you're doing now. We talked about the eatery. We talked about your journey. What are you doing now that maybe people can contact you for, connect with you, that really is showing that activism and it's showing up in a different way than like the eatery or just how you started?
Sure. So the eatery is something that was a stepping stone to what is currently happening in my life. And that was um, absolutely necessary in terms of developing where I am now with online food education and just food demonstrations and food education in that way. Food is my activism in that I really believe that if you can, for one, feed people something delicious, um, they will absolutely change their mind on things. But if you can teach people how to feed themselves, that will
Mm,
change their life.
wow.
And that is something that I will always remain passionate about and continue to pursue.
So changing minds versus changing life, and changing life is what's going to really change our communities, our families, our world, right? So it
For sure.
really does help with teaching.
Yes. I mean, if you're going to, change somebody's mind about them believing that a plant-based meal can't be amazing and delicious, go ahead and make them something to eat that is and change their mind. But if you want to really help them embrace that their whole life can be changed, whether it's from a place of health or compassion, um, and anything in between, that is them learning how to feed themselves.
Wow. Okay. Sarah, I see why you have a podcast.
I do have a podcast.
You
Yes.
do
What's on
have a
your plate?
podcast. Yes, you do. Well, tell the people, what's the name of your podcast?
So the podcast is an evolution of the storefront. Again, so many wonderful things came out of that storefront experience. The podcast name is "What's on Your Plate," and it's a play on food, of course, and it does include conversations about food and plant-based eating. Have had many talented chefs and foodies in that space, but it's also a place to really take a look at what is heavy, what is abundant on our plates and in our lives, really peel back the layers of life to just take a look at what is transforming us, what is healing us, where we can grow, and maybe
Mhm.
even have our minds changed about any number of topics.
Okay, so we're on the podcast. You are talking to different people, diverse topics, but certainly sharing information about this lifestyle as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to go back to something that you mentioned. You mentioned your grandmother's and the kitchens being there. And I'm smiling again because that's another thing that we have in common. And I no longer have my grandmother with me. So those memories are even more valuable to me. But I remember also being in the kitchen. I believe that my love of food started with those conversations, um, shopping with her and helping to pick out the ingredients and knowing that we're going to make something together. Like all of that, I remember that. I remember being excited about that. And that is where I believe, again, my love of food started. I had those experiences with my mother as well. But, there's something about grandparents, they let you get your way and, you can do
Yeah.
some things that
Yeah.
you can't do. So, shout out to all the grandparents. But what is your favorite food memory when you think about your grandmother's, or do you have one?
Well, I mean, honestly, my favorite food memory involves my grandfather.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I'll try not to like get all up in my feels as I speak about it, but my grandfather, I had four amazing grandparents, all of whom have passed, but this memory involves one of my grandfathers that he was somebody whom I looked to as a father figure, and I
Okay.
always sort of sought his approval in ways in life, and he was one of my best supporters in all things that I've ever done in my life. And when I went vegan, he kind of side-eyed me and was like, I don't know about, okay, like, I love you, I support you, but,
What are you doing?
this is me. Yeah. So he would always try everything I would make. But there was one time in particular that I brought to Thanksgiving a homemade pumpkin pie.
Okay.
And he had some, he took a bite of it, and he looked up at me and said, "This is just like my mother used to make."
Oh, wow. Wow. That had to feel so good.
Chef, I can't even tell you, like, even saying that and thinking about that, I get teary-eyed because that meant so much, just not just me feeding him something delicious, but that it brought on such a wonderful memory for him. And,
Yes.
really, food is so personal and it's so intimate and it's so connective, right? I mean, food is
Mhm.
what brings people together. And when you can create something that brings people into an emotional state like that, of
Mhm.
feeling just good and nostalgic, I don't know. I don't think I can describe anything quite better than that.
I can't either. And when you're in that moment, and I have been in that moment as well with different people I've known, people who are strangers, the feeling is still the same because you know that what you were purposely trying to do in the kitchen has truly translated to this person. And you didn't know the story. You don't know what they're going to say. But the
Mhm.
fact that you've touched their heart, their soul, that again, because when you think about food and you smells bring back memories.
Mhm.
Taste brings back memories. And when you can experience that with someone and they share that with you, yes, it's very intimate. And it is, I think, for a chef, the highest compliment.
I would agree.
Yeah. So I am glad that you shared that experience with your grandfather and that it still brings you to an emotional space. Because I know what that would feel like. I've had those experiences myself. And thank you for sharing that story. Um, you've got other stories that I'm sure you would love to share with people and get them to understand that they can create these type of experiences in their kitchens, even with a new type of lifestyle, or even if somebody doesn't want to be vegan, like you said before, you can be plant forward, or you can begin to just explore what it is to have more plant based foods on your plate, less processed food, less meat. All of these things do not mean that it's boring, and don't, these are things that people, your kids, other people will have good
Mhm.
memories as well. And so when you're teaching people centric meals in their own homes, through your online food education courses and ebooks and mentoring, um, what kinds of responses are you getting from people who are going through that with you, going through those different education courses and different things with you?
I think people are just relieved to know that it's not as complicated as they think it is.
Okay.
Um, really taking the time to learn that creating meals for the week, or even starting with one single meal, doesn't have to consume like your whole day, your whole Sunday afternoon. I think a lot of people feel like, we've just gotten into the culture of fast this and instantaneous that and convenience
Mhm.
this. And I think that people think that anything else than that is going to just take too much of their time. But really, when you get down to the very basics of doing something like making your own bread or your own tortillas, making your own salad dressings, things
Yeah.
that people generally run to the grocery store for, um, if you just have a couple things on hand, very basic ingredients, you can create those things faster, cheaper, and more
Mhm.
deliciously in your own home than if
Mhm.
you if you go to the store to get it, and it's much healthier on top of that. And I think people are surprised to realize that it's much easier than they would ever imagine.
Yeah. And to have someone guide them who is as passionate as you are, I think is the cherry on top.
Thank you.
So that is awesome. Well, I thank you again for being here. I thank you for sharing your passion, your memories, and even your history and what you're doing now. I think this is definitely going to be of benefit to our listeners. However, before I let you go, I had one question, but I'm thinking of something else. And I'm going to ask you this. How would you describe food joy? What does that
Mm,
mean to you?
something that is equally satisfying and nourishing.
All right. Listen, that you said it. We're going to end here because I think that something equally satisfying and nourishing is what we all not only want, but what we probably really need on our plates. And just like you talk about in your podcast, I'm not just talking about the edible foods, I'm talking about all of our plate, what we do in our life, our work, everything should have that balance. And I think it's when we're out of balance that we run into issues and problems. But when you do, there are people like Miss Sarah Metzger who is there to help you. So I want you guys to definitely reach out if you're interested in any of her online food education courses, her mentoring, or her ebooks. So, Sarah, can you let them know how they can contact you and connect?
Absolutely. So I am absolutely on the socials. I am on Instagram at lilulos.vegan. The website is lilulosvegan.com. And then it is Lilulos Vegan on Facebook as well. So hopefully we can put the spelling of that in the show notes. I know it's a little bit tricky for people to say, but side note, that name is a combination of my two dogs and my son's name in the order of which I acquired them. So that's how that name develops.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah.
What are their names? What are their actual names?
So the dogs were first, and they were Lienko and Luca, um, who have since passed. This name is
Oh,
quite old, but and then my son's name is Logan. So it's Lilulos.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That is so nice. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to have this information on the website. So we'll have the spelling, we'll have all of your socials so that people can contact you. So it will be in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for joining me on Chef's Diary today. I enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed learning because I definitely learned some things today. And I wish you the absolute best.
Thank you, Chef. Thanks for having me on. It's been an honor.
Diary. Today I learned that habits aren't just about what I do, but also how I think. So, to keep a healthy mindset and develop more healthy habits, I'm going to be more intentional about my self care. Listen, I'm a chef who makes great food, but I also deserve to live a great life. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening to Chef's Diary.